I'd like to call our Scott County Fiscal Court business meeting to order. Today is the 27th of January and 7 p.m. And appreciate you all being here. I'd like to ask Ms. Hamilton to, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Thompson, would you lead us?
Yes, sir. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Ms. Hamilton, would you now call the roll?
Mr. Hostetler?
Present.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mr. Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Corman?
Present.
Mr. Ellison? Mr. Thompson?
Present.
Mr. Livingston?
Here.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Judge Covington?
Present. Thank you very much, Ms. Hamilton. At this time, I'd like to go to agenda item number 4, consideration of the previous meeting's minutes. Are there any questions or comments related to those as presented?
Motion.
Motion from Mr. David Livingston. Is there a second? Second from Mr. Alvin Lyons. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 5, transfers as presented. Any questions or comments related to the transfers?
Motion for approval.
Motion from Mr. Kelly Corman. Second from Mr. Rick Hostetler.
Could I, just an explanation on the state treasurer excise? I don't remember seeing that before. I'm sure I
Oh,
have.
that's
But,
for the handshake,
Yeah, bills and handshake. No.
but I'll tell you here in just a minute.
okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, get ahead.
Okay. Anything else about transfers? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now to the bills and hand checks. Are there any questions related to those as presented?
Chris, do you mind to explain the treasurer?
Hey, Kentucky House Bill 8, which was passed last session, included some additional reimbursements for EMS. So we get now additional reimbursements from the state, but it's taxed, which is what that handshake is for, because we were late getting it up. Then that money, all that tax money is pulled and then divvied back out into all participating EMS agencies in the state. And that hasn't happened yet. So how that is actually happens, I don't know if that's a request we make or if that's just split evenly. If you split the pie evenly and pass it out, I don't know. That's what that is.
So we pay it and they give it back.
Yeah.
And then pay.
Right, we
then
get-
pay it again.
Yes.
I wonder if Rand or maybe Cam Culbertson could research how that is distributed.
Motion to approve, Cam.
Cam, you think you could help us on that? And answer your question?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. Any other questions related to bills and hand checks?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. Alvin Lyons. Second from Mr. Chad Wallace. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we are going to go down and ask Mr. Matt Summers to address the court. Matt, I appreciate you coming. In regards to a solar ordinance draft, and then would like to make note that Jared Holland shared some pending legislation at the state level. Are you aware of that, Matt?
I'm not, no.
So Jared shared that by email. I have not had time. He just shared it this afternoon. Haven't had time to digest it, but it'd be something we need to dig into. But Matt, we've shared the draft, and we've also previously looked at the Kentucky Resource Council model ordinance. So the court is aware of it. The court's aware of the need and the potential issues that could come with a solar energy, farm.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you coming and sharing, and then court can ask any questions, and then also you can you plan on giving us kind of a timeline of where we're going. So
Yeah.
appreciate it very much.
Judge, before we start, the proposed legislation that Jared sent us, I didn't get all the way through it, but it dealt with the cost of upgrading the grid to carry the extra load. Now, it may got into other stuff too. I didn't get through the whole thing, but the first part of it dealt with if solar company came in and built a farm, they had to be responsible for upgrading the grid to handle what they produced. But there's probably more, but I did.
Pay to get from A to B.
Right.
Yeah. Al, or Judge.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the, like, Cliff Notes version, like LRC gives out of that bill?
No, I just have
Okay,
what Jared
we can
sent.
ask Tommy.
Yeah.
To get the Cliff Notes version.
So we could share with everybody. And then along those lines, Master Alvin Lyons had mentioned some additional language that I shared with you about the ground cover, and Alvin, we've got that in Matt's draft. So I'll let Matt take it from here.
I guess based on what you said, you all are fairly familiar with the Resource Council's model ordinance. Okay, I just wanted to double check.
Yes.
You don't need me to necessarily go through line by line here.
No.
Okay, you all are familiar with the exempt and non-exempt, I guess.
It might be beneficial to cover that.
Okay, so I think that is a good place to start. So some energy generating entities are exempt from local zoning per KRS. The number is cited here in the ordinance, in the model ordinance, KRS 100.324. So those are generally those entities that are governed by the Public Service Commission. KRS 100 says that those entities, KU being one of the largest examples, are exempt from our regulations, sort of except if they, construct an office building or something like that. But their utility structures are exempt. So those providers, if they wanted to build a solar farm of sorts, would be exempt from an ordinance like this one. So we draft ordinances like this one for what the ordinance calls sitting board regulated SESs or merchant electric ones. So they would not fall under the Public Service Commission, but they would build a solar farm, for example, and then they would sell it to other providers to potentially to supply power to other states, things like that. So just so we're all on the same page, if KU came in, after we adopt this ordinance, they may not or likely would not follow our siting regulations. They would follow a different process that the Public Service Commission has. But for those that would,
Hey, Matt.
yeah, sorry.
Before you leave that, have you looked at any of that type of thing I've seen KU, I've seen their little solar farms. I think I'm not sure if that's KU or not, on 64 headed towards Winchester.
Towards Winchester.
I
don't
that
think
may
it's
not be
KU.
KU,
Yeah,
it's
but
not, but it's a local utility there.
Yes.
I have seen some KU ones, I just can't remember where. I'm just wondering, I never thought about the fact that they wouldn't have to go along with us, but I know they've got guidelines, but it sounds like you haven't had a chance to look at that.
Yeah, no,
You know what I mean?
I've not had a chance to look into what specifically that the Public Service Commission
Right.
would sort of handle as far as the siting.
That probably ought to be something we consider
Yeah, that would not be a bad sort of thing to keep in the back of our minds.
to kind of compare what we're trying to do. Thank you, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Outside of that, we sort of break them down into categories. Certain types of solar systems, we consider to be, relatively harmless or benign as far as, zoning and siting. So if you're wanting to put one on your rooftop, you're wanting to, have some sort of integrated, solar panels into another type of building material on your house or barn or whatever, those are relatively benign. Even some of the smaller ones, if it's, less than the square footage of a typical house, the regulations that the model ordinance provides are a little bit lighter on those, and it really concerns itself with, once you get, these facilities that are larger than 2,500 square feet. Now, some of the numbers, and I'm sure, Mr. Fitzgerald has shared this with you all, they put numbers in there for, as far as breaking down, the different size categories. If we feel like those numbers need to be adjusted somewhat, that is obviously something we could do as part of, making the ordinance fit Scott County. But for the moment and in this draft, I left the breakdown between small, intermediate, and large ground-mounted facilities the same as what they had in the model ordinance. So in the draft that you all have there in front of you, I didn't really make any changes as far as the definitions, the purposes, the applicability. There might be, one or two places where they had a spot where we, would fill in the correct, jurisdiction. We filled those in. I think some of the changes start when it comes to the use table. And really, with that, we just took, once again, what they had in the model ordinance, applied it to our zoning districts rather than sort of talking about broad land use categories like residential, commercial, and industrial and agricultural. So we broke down there in the use table that I believe is on page 4, in what zoning districts are these permitted, conditionally permitted, or prohibited as primary and accessory uses. So a primary use we would consider if it was, if you've got a lot or a tract of land and that is the only thing that's on it, or that is, greater than 50% of any other uses on the property, that would be the primary use. If you've got, if you've got a lot and you just want, a small solar array in the backyard, we would consider that an accessory use. Or, you've got some extra space on, on your property and, it's 40% of the property, would also consider that accessory, just because the primary use would be the majority. Just so we're all talking about the same thing. So we applied that in general. Like I said, if it's something you're wanting to put on your house or things like that, or small accessory uses in your backyard, we think that those fit in relatively well. In the table we've kind of listed those as permitted by right. You don't have to go through any special hoops or get permission from the planning commission to do it. You can just go get your building permit or your electrical permit and sort of get that work underway. And it really is mostly when it comes to the larger facilities where we thought it was necessary, and in certain districts, for those to go to both the Board of Adjustment for review of the use that you're proposing, and then if that is approved, you would go then to the Planning Commission to get your development plan approved. After that, just like you would if you were building, any large scale facility. So that's, I guess, a brief overview of the use table. As I said before, a lot of it, we follow in line with the model ordinance after looking at it and getting some comments from our attorney, Charlie Perkins. A lot of the language, does work pretty well with our zoning ordinance. Once we get into the general applicable requirements, I think it's number 6. And if we go to page 6, actually, there's a couple changes that we made to try to adapt it to our regulations away from the model ordinance. So we did think it would be appropriate to increase the distance that these would be from residentially zoned districts. From I think in the model ordinance they had 50 feet. We kind of bumped that up to 100 feet just to kind of give that extra buffering. We also thought it would be appropriate to increase the distance that it would be from the center line of a road. In the model ordinance, once again, they had 50 feet. We moved that to 100. Just if you think about the center line of a road, typically you want at least 25 feet from the center line to a property for at least potential right-of-way in the future. If it's a county road, that we would want them or expect them to set aside at least 25 feet. And then if the setback from the center line is only 50 feet, then we've got potential where solar panels would be closer to the street than you could build a house or a barn or things like that. So we bumped that back to 100 feet just to kind of keep, once again, sort of keep them apart, allow for space for buffering so that it doesn't potentially become sort of an eyesore for the community.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This might be it's going to sound pretty simple, maybe even dumb. What about heat generated from them on a July day and only possibly being 100 feet from a property line, and then the house being 40 feet from the property line. So you're talking 140 feet from a solar field potentially, and the heat that's going to generate.
Yeah.
I mean, do we know if there are issues with that, or?
I mean, that's not something that I had, I guess, read when we looked at the model ordinance and what they were doing in some other states. I mean, it is a possibility, especially if, you know, it was a scenario where they were to, let's say, gravel the area around on the rest of the site, you know, because then, you know, with that loss of vegetation, you start to experience sort of the heat island effect that you sometimes see in cities where the temperature can be several degrees higher than it might be, you know, outside the city. So, I mean, there is a possibility that, yes, they could end up being sort of hot spots, if you will, just sort of around the community.
I have not read anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that popped in my head
Yeah.
as I was reading through this again, and, you know.
Something
It's
that,
not that far.
Yeah.
And, you know, a setback could be 40 feet for the house, and that's 140 feet's not that far from. But I mean, the possibility of where these are going, you're probably not going to be 140 feet from a residence.
but it still shouldn't take very long for me to try to research and see if there's a significant temperature variance because of these installations. So I'll, you know, Matt, maybe you and I can do that together.
Yeah, I can take a look at and see if there are any numbers on
Yeah.
there about it. Yeah. Let's see. We are, I guess, at this time recommending removing number 3. You'll note that we have it struck through. I left the language there and just did the strike through because it is in the model ordinance. In general, we don't, you know, this kind of came from Charlie as well, but we don't really like it when there's like a mechanism in there for the neighbor to waive setback requirements, just because, you know, that may not be the neighbor for the solar farm forever. So, you know, they might waive it, or, you know, maybe get paid to waive those setbacks, and then they may just sell the property to someone else who then has to, you know, deal with a potential nuisance. So we didn't want to include that in there. If they do want setbacks, you know, the appropriate avenues to request those through the Board of Adjustment, and there's a, you know, state statute lays out, you know, the findings that are necessary for them to get those variances. So I sort of prefer that process rather than just the neighbor saying, you know, I don't want them.
Does the neighbor have say, or do they just testify in front of?
I mean, the neighbor can testify, and, you know, I mean, they can, I guess, support the variance. Ultimately, with variances, it comes down to, you know, things like, are there unique features to the property that make it sort of impossible to build somewhere else, and that's why you need to be closer to the property line. And, you know, we also look at the impacts that it may have on the neighboring property owners. But those, you know, those are spelled out in state statute, the findings that the board would have to find in order to grant the variance.
Any other questions about the variance?
Okay. And, you know, number 5 that we propose striking is roughly similar. You know, I don't like building mechanisms in there that for variances that are different than what we already have, sort of in state statute. Some of the other items that we added there on page 6 are really just sort of clarifications that the board has to find adequate justification before they, you know, potentially reduce landscaping buffers or things of that nature. Moving sort of towards page 7, item 3 there is that language from McCracken County, I think it was, about the topsoil not being removed, and making sure that, you know, they're not just going to spray herbicides to kill all the grass and vegetation around them. It does allow for them to do it around fence lines to kind of reduce some of the maintenance. One thing I did think was kind of interesting about that language, and, you know, I don't know, I assume we'll have some discussion at the Planning Commission, is the grasses inside and outside the fence being a maximum of 10 inches. I know in sort of rural areas, you know, it is somewhat common for it to get taller. So I didn't know, Tim, I don't know off the top of my head because I don't deal with it. What is the maximum height for tall grass in the county?
You can have, excuse me, you can have a farm exemption. Basically, you have to mow it a couple times a year, but those are some issues that we've dealt with in the past, Dylan. We're trying to kind of navigate through that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
Initially, we were kind of going with that because that's kind of what they were advising through International Property Maintenance Code. But we've kind of adjusted back on that regard, but I don't see it being an issue in fence rows like that. It's typically when you just have overgrowth in fields or whatever.
Okay.
Any other questions about that?
Okay. It's just sort of moving on from there. We kind of get into the conditional use permit application requirements, and they are extensive. That it is a lot more information than we would look for on most of our conditional use permit applications. But I think in a lot of cases it's justified when you consider the size and scale of these types of applications. So, I think that it is all justified. We did add, I think it's in that same section under, sort of in the middle of page 9, there's a lowercase e item. At least our current thinking, and we'll kind of get into this here in a little bit later, is that, we would probably, in addition to making these changes to the zoning ordinance, we would probably add a section to the subdivision and development regulations that we already have that deals with things like, the holding of surety, a section that would sort of work with this part in the zoning ordinance, allowing for surety to sort of be held for the eventual decommissioning of these facilities. But that item E there is sort of pointing to a section of the subregs that we would, I guess, have to add as well. The public notice would be the same as with all of our other Board of Adjustment applications. I guess there is some room there for us to maybe increase the notification area, but usually, I guess currently for applications outside city limits, for Board of Adjustment applications, we would notify all adjoining property owners. I think that's, if I remember correctly, that is what the state requires in KRS 100. Somebody wants to make a 1,000-acre solar farm, it is going to notify, quite a few people. If they're doing a 10-acre, solar farm, it's going to notify quite a few less. But it would still obviously always notify all immediately adjoining. We also notify those that would adjoin across the right-of-way.
And they'd also have to put signage up, correct?
Not for the Board of Adjustment application. When they go to Planning Commission, we have different notification requirements for Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
For Planning Commission, they have to post a sign on the property, and they have to mail notices to all property owners within 1,000 feet if it's outside the urban service boundary, which I imagine most of the larger facilities that may come here would be outside the urban service boundary. So I guess, yes, there would be a difference, between when the Board of Adjustment makes some sort of ruling on the use versus when the Planning Commission reviews the actual development plan.
Matt, how prevalent are these now? I know that we have solar on a lot of houses. We have in the business park, there's a lot of things that have solar on it.
Yeah.
But as far as this, particularly across the state, I know we got to get ahead of the game, but is this something that's becoming more and more common?
It is. We have, I guess, sort of an email group of professional planners in the state, and this is something I haven't heard of a lot of activity on it in the last couple of months, but anywhere starting three or so years ago, there was a lot of discussion. There's the one in Winchester. There were some, I think it was Danville, around that area, around Elizabethtown.
In Harrison County, there's been a lot of debate. Now, I'd like Alvin to add.
I've already been contacted by one of these companies for one of my properties.
Oh, wow.
And I looked up the company. They've got developments as large as 2,200 acres in a solar plant farm. So this is something we need to be aware of and be on top of. If you drive through a lot of southern Indiana, you see a lot of smaller ones, kind of like the one in Winchester, which, that's small, 20, 30 acres, something like that, just guessing. But my concern is those big ones. And it's going to get worse because there is so much money going to be poured into green energy projects. It's not going to matter whether they're really productive or whether they're viable, but the money's going to be there to build them. Whether it's going to be there to maintain them and actually operate them, that's another question. So that's what I'm very concerned about.
As far
Thank you, Alvin.
as far
Tim?
as like topography, I know that I mean, I would assume that these would be typically on like a flatter area. Does it matter? Because I know obviously Sadie'ville is
They
different than
want
Stamping.
flatter areas. They don't want,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got a hill farm. If they want it, I'd probably be talking about it today, but they don't want it. They want my good land. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they want the same developable land that everyone seems to want.
So
They want-
stamping ground and area, that'd probably be more of the area probably than.
Well, everything, all
Sadie'ville,
south.
nothing flat in Sadie'ville.
Yeah, I've been contacted just this week, that's the second time.
Okay.
And all of my neighbors, they probably got the second round of contacting.
Oh, maybe.
But there's a lot of folks around me that have been contacted. And I got a phone call, I didn't respond to it, but I had a message this week from an outfit, so it's coming.
So one of the items that we've discussed is, you know, the security for decommissioning. I noticed you have that at the end,
Yes.
and I think it's very important that we have that consideration as well.
Yeah, and that is the last section here is at least a draft of how we potentially see the decommissioning security being held. You know, I had some discussions earlier today with our engineer, and I guess you know, we've got some changes that we're thinking about making even to this draft that we've got here. He does not recommend that we do letters of credit for this. He doesn't. Well, I guess on the one hand, he doesn't think that banks will want to issue letters of credit for this type of security. So I don't know. It's still something we're discussing, and obviously if you all have feedback on that, my gut is that maybe where it ends up is we just ask for cash surety that goes into an escrow account, and you know that
But my
the amount gets updated every 5 years. Basically.
But my question is, how do we set that amount?
Yeah. So that is something
Yeah.
that the model ordinance does is, you know, it spells out that, you know, when they apply for their conditional use permit for these large facilities, they have to submit a decommissioning plan. So that plan sets out like how they're going to remove all, not just the above ground structures, but, you know, structures that might be below the ground. And basically, I guess as much as they can, return it to whatever the use was, or make it somewhat usable for whatever the use was previously. So they will have an engineer draw up those plans and make cost estimates basically as far as how much they think that will cost. And they're able to kind of subtract out, you know, any scrap value, you know, current scrap value of those materials that they might be able to sell. And then the rest is the amount that they need to be prepared to put up.
Mr. Wallace?
Well, man, like, I believe sometimes when we do our bonding for roads, you know, it's at 125% at what the cost would be to pave the roads. However, this is the imperative part of what we need to do, is it needs to be on an annual review, because as costs go up, even though we're at 125% of what the perceived cost would be, it needs to be continually renewed. And we've had situations where those bonds were issued 20 years ago, and 125% 20 years ago won't cover what a road would cost today, or in this case, a decommission. And I would think that that's the route we need to go to make sure that if something happens, that's not costing taxpayers dollars to fix a problem that private developers.
Do you feel strongly about that being an annual event? Could it be every 2 years? You know, I'm not, you know, I know that there's only so many hours and we have so much staff who would do that. But I don't disagree with you that there needs to be a review. I'm just asking, does that need to be annual, or could it be every 2 or 3 years? I think that's a question that needs to be, you know, do other places do it on a?
Yeah, and that is something we can look into, is how often they update those plans. And I guess I was on I guess it was a Zoom call when Mr. Fitzgerald presented the model ordinance, and he mentioned in that call, you know, that is the 5 years is a number they, you know, just kind of put in there. They thought it was a reasonable number.
To do a review.
We can certainly have that review more frequently or less frequently. I think more is probably more frequently than 5 years is probably the right way to go, especially considering, as you mentioned, like some of the recent rises in inflation that we've seen. Not that they're building, but labor costs could certainly increase by an unexpected amount, from year to year.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to cover, Matt? Could you cover the kind of the timeline?
I can't. Let me finish this note real quick.
All right.
So can we go back to the security real quick? Not of the area,
Yes, sir.
but the cash security and everything. Are we talking about bonds also, or are we just talking about cash, CDs?
Yeah, I mean, bonds might work. I would certainly defer to Ben's judgment on that, just because he has a lot more experience working with those and sort of, the process to sort of call the bonds and things like that. And I guess to some extent how easy it is. I know there have been some cases where, we go to call the bond and then, it ends up in court in multiple appeals and, you don't end up with the amount that you thought you should to finish the project. But that is something that we've discussed briefly, but we may need to.
Because, I mean, if you did it like a road and you went 125%, can you imagine the cash that they would have to set aside? They're going to cry foul at that. They're not going to, I mean, if it's a $100 million project, they're not going to set aside $125 million for decommissioning.
On the flip side of things,
Whereas they could have a bond.
well, yeah, I'm thinking of bond, but as far as in terms of saving the taxpayers, unfortunately, we've fell victim to some of these issues where there hasn't been enough bonding kept back, and tax dollars have had to be to correct a wrong. And so whatever we can do to put in the measures prior to that, I think that would be prudent for the court.
I agree, and I want to make a comment on that because you also assume that these places are always going to be doing well and making money. And if they're not, and 5 years down the road, we come back and say, we've reevaluated this and we need you to put this much more money into this. So we don't have it. Then what do you do? They're in business, they're making money, but they can't afford to do what we're asking them to. We can't probably ask them to shut down their business.
We repo it.
And ownership,
Right.
Scott
You
County
don't do
Fiscal
that.
Court sold it to you.
So I'm just agreeing with Chad. It's like, you got to get as much up front as you can because that's your best shot of getting something.
Yeah.
and the ownership could have changed 3 times in that
Sure.
5 years. That's, the developers of these are not generally the operators, what I understand. They build them and sell them.
So let's make sure we can get some good data on that.
Yes, we certainly will. As far as timeline, we do have some details that we want to hammer out as staff before we bring a draft to the commission. So I think a realistic timeline might be that we take it to the Planning Commission for public hearing, possibly in March. If we assume that the public hearing goes well, that there's no major changes to the plan proposed by the Planning Commission, or they want to postpone their vote a month, or their recommendation, I should say, that means we could potentially have approval or a recommendation of approval in March, ready for fiscal court, and like all ordinance changes, it would take 2 readings before fiscal court to adopt the ordinance.
Sounds good to me. What questions does anyone have for Matt or comments?
Well, a comment.
Yes, sir.
It goes to everything everybody's already said. I think it would be prudent maybe to possibly ask Jared or to look at what the SEC, not the SEC, but,
Public Service Commission.
the public PSC, the Public Service Commission, what their guidelines are, because I feel like they would cover the bonding somehow, because they're not going to want to get, however that works for the Public Service Commission, they're not going to want to get stuck either.
Yes, sir.
So it'd be well worth looking at what they're doing, because I imagine that in Kentucky, they're probably comparing to what other states are doing for that. So
Okay.
there might be a little wealth of information there
We'll make sure we
to
get
help us compare.
get that on, and I'll ask Jared to double check on that as well. So thank you so much. If there's not any other questions, then we'll move on from this agenda item. Thank you, Matt. Number 8, EMS new hires. Chris is here with us in person, and Jeff is with us virtually via Zoom. So, Chris, thanks. Could you present information for the court's consideration?
Sure. Thanks, Judge. So I'd like to present to the court two full-time paramedics, Jason Crosley and Amanda Lundgren. Jason would begin tentatively, both their start dates will be February 14th, just kind of depending on passing background checks and physicals. Jason would begin at $16.01 an hour, and Amanda, who has a little less experience, initial salary would be $15.17 an hour.
Any questions or comments?
Those are full-time.
Full-time, yeah, and I have.
Was that due to your staffing? I know it's.
Right, that puts us full on paper, fully staffed. We've got a couple of folks off on injuries that were kind of still up in the air. Not sure when we'll get those folks back. But that brings us full.
Any other questions about the full-time?
Motion.
Motion from Mr. Rick Hostetler, second from Mr. Tim Thompson. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, and then I would like to present as well Robert Carpenter for a part-time paramedic position. His initial rate would be $14.54 an hour, and his start date will have to be worked out, but sometime within the next few weeks, working around his full-time job.
Can we do all 5
We can do
part-time?
the other
Yeah,
part-times.
they're just different rates
Yeah.
because the others are EMTs. So then Serena Fuller will be a part-time EMT at $10.51 an hour. Sierra Osterhage, part-time EMT, $10.51 an hour. Shylon Seacrest, part-time EMT at $10.51 an hour. And Robert Ellington, a part-time EMT at $10.51 an hour.
Any questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. Alvin Lyons.
Second.
Second from Kelly Corman. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll move down to number 9, Code Enforcement Board appointments.
Judge, I'm going to step out. and recuse
Yes, sir.
myself.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Mr. Thompson recused himself. We have 2 Code Enforcement Board appointments, and one's a joint, and then there's one joint alternate. And we'll also have one more joint alternate to appoint that we need to do at our next meeting. But Mr. Steve McLean, it would be our joint appointment, and Mr. Johnny Saunders would be our joint alternate. Mr. McLean used to be a reporter for the newspaper, and I know him well and know he would do a good job. And then Mr. Saunders is a retired builder, and confident that he would do that as well. Are there any questions or comments about these 2 proposed appointments?
So, but the city's already done.
Yes, sir.
Their part of it.
Yes, sir.
Motion for approval.
Motion from Mr. Chad Wallace.
Second.
A second from Mr. David Livingston. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Tim.
Tim,
Good. I'm glad you reminded me. Thanks, Tim. Next, we have, yesterday we opened bids from on our Lyle Road Soccer Complex restroom and concessions building. We'd previously put this out to bid, came back higher than I anticipated. We did some value engineering. We removed the second floor that was storage, and we really looked at HVAC, mechanical, went from a metal roof to a asphalt roof. Just really went from top to bottom trying to do value engineering. We put that back out to bid, and we had 5 bids on the project, and the low bid that came in was from Marilla Construction at $682,000. Previously, the previous bid that we had was over 1.1. So I think we're going to still have a quality facility. It meets the needs of the complex, and my recommendation would be to accept this bid from Marilla Construction. What questions or comments does anyone have in regards to the proposal?
So that's tying in the concession stands building, that's,
This is for the building
And
and
the parking lot
and
lobby.
concrete around it. There's a pad behind it that's pretty big, and but that we've already approved the site prep,
right.
and this would be for the building. And
And then all the utilities are in.
yes,
So it'll
I think
complete
20.
package.
I think it's like 20 feet from the building in is the utilities in this, but we added the electrical in that last.
Yeah. In other words, this will give us the complete package.
Yeah.
Turnkey.
Yes.
Ready to go.
Now, Rick, we've got the light fixtures in the parking lot. I haven't chosen them. I think that is the one piece that's like the actual light poles. There's about 8 of them. There's not a whole lot of them. But that's the one piece that we need to add. What questions or comments does anyone have?
Judge, currently Marilla is doing work for us on the earth movement, and
Marilla,
and are you happy with what they're doing?
Been very happy with them. Their sub, Mountain Excavating, I mean, they've made significant progress, since they started work. Now, in the last couple of weeks, the weather's gotten them, but they're. I'm very pleased with the progress, and I think they're doing a good job.
Did they have a projected completion date?
150 days from 150 days would be the target. Substantial completion, I think, is the way they used it. I think it takes a couple, 2 or 3 weeks to get the contract ready, to sign the contract, and then what Ramona of Element Design shared, that usually you give them like a 2-week window to have a start date. Now, if they want to have a start date before, that's up to them. But, I think that they would move along with it, weather permitting. And it's good that they have the site prep as well, instead of having 2 different contractors.
Where are they located out of?
Marilla is Lexington.
Okay.
Motion to approve Marilla's bid.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. What other questions or comments? I am excited and appreciate the support for this project because I think it's long needed, and I think it addresses the needs of, the figures that I've been given is over 1,000 families, 1,000 kids. So that's exciting, and will provide a nice facility for the soccer program. So any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll move to, as I shared via email, February 11th would be a regularly scheduled meeting date at 9 a.m. I am going to be out of town, and would ask the court to consider moving our regular meeting date to February 10th on a Thursday at 9 a.m. I believe, after checking with you all, that fits most of your schedules. I think everybody's schedule. Would there be a motion to approve that change?
I'll make a motion, sir.
Mr. Thompson makes the motion. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Second for Mr. Rick Hostetler. Any other questions or comments?
Judge, are we going to be looking at the zone change for leaf and barrel
Yeah.
at that meeting?
Yeah, let me,
Okay.
so we got a motion, we got a second. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Chad, just to share with everyone, We will do a first reading on February 10th at 9 a.m. At the first reading, that is, and Rand, please comment as well, but that is, just that first reading has to happen, and there can be no comment at the first reading. If the court decides to pass the first reading and we go to a second, then there could be a opportunity for both sides to have 15 minutes of comment, and then the court could consider that from there. What else would you like to add?
My plan is, if that's what you all want to do, send a letter to the two attorneys for each side, telling them that, 210 for the first reading, they're welcome to come, but no arguments can be heard, and then on 224, second reading, and then 15 minutes each.
And I've already had phone conversations with both counsel from both sides. Both sides has counsel, and they are aware of this pending change or timeline. And then the other item that's in Rand's letter is we're going to ask them if they wish to file a memo with the court that they both have that option. So I'm sure we'll get one from both.
But in the second meeting, we still don't get to ask questions except for what's on the record.
Rand?
Yeah, it can't be an evidentiary hearing. Now, I suppose if they're making an argument and you want them to, you're confused on or have a question, I think that's appropriate.
Clarification?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But, and I've told them to submit, if they want to submit something, they're ready to do it by the 18th. So hopefully that gives you all time to look it over.
Any other questions there? All right. I'll move to number 12, new business, and I have two items. The first item, I'd like to ask JR to step to the podium and share. JR and I had a meeting, and looking back and looking forward at the same time, the need for single axle dump trucks. Could you share your inventory and how old they are right now?
Yes, sir, and this goes back, Judge, to 3 years ago when we did the capital projects, 5-year. I have got, and that was my top priority of replacing aging equipment. With COVID and everything, it kind of got things off kilter, and I have got 5 frontline trucks that push snow and spread salt that is over 20 years old.
5.
5. Of course, salt takes a major toll on stuff. And knowing the budget's coming up, I started planning about 2 weeks ago, putting some numbers together, talking to some suppliers, and I planned on asking for 2 dump trucks in this budget year. So Bluegrass International, we bought some trucks off them before. They're under state contract pricing. I'm finding out that the availability is not good at all. Each dealership is allotted so many trucks according to the size of them. Bluegrass has got like 3 or 4 spots left open to go ahead and get an order in to get them by the end of this year. And if you wait till budget time is passed and everything, it might be 1.5 years, 2 years before you get these trucks. What I am asked to do is get permission from the judge and the court to go ahead and get these two of these slots for 2 new dump trucks. There is a cancellation policy. If something happens with the budget or something by August 1st, we can back out of this with no penalties, no problem.
No obligations.
No obligation whatsoever.
By August 1st.
And I'm asking for permission to go ahead and reserve these 2 slots and get them
How are they paid? Is it like?
after the
percent
truck
down
is delivered.
After it's
Yes.
delivered, okay.
Yes, sir.
And I don't think you mentioned, they're 123.
137,000 each, and
Okay.
it's fully equipped with hydraulics, controls in the cabs, everything. All we gotta do is put the spreader and a blade on it and they're ready to roll.
Sir, what's your plan for the other three? Are you looking at next year maybe doing
Yes,
that?
yes. I didn't wanna get greedy too.
But JR also has a need for some pickup trucks as well.
Yes, sir.
And we've discussed that as well. And, you know, we're not far from really digging in on the budget process, and I'll be communicating with department heads and constitutional officers to start putting those together. But JR is always proactive, and I appreciate, you know, I'd like to be out in front. And with the cancellation policy, if the court elected not to put that in the budget, we can cancel it and there's no obligation. So what other questions does anyone have related to this? And I would recommend approving this request.
I move to go ahead and reserve 2 of those trucks.
I think we'd be silly not to.
Yeah.
Second, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any other comments or questions?
Ralphin and
Rick.
Rick? No other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you
JR,
very
thank
much.
you. No, we appreciate you, and
You're not gonna talk about pickup trucks? I thought you was a pickup man.
That's on the regular budget.
Yes, regular budget.
we're not far from that. Now, this next one comes from me, but I will ask Stacy to comment once I go through this, and because Stacy and I are the ones that are juggling it. The past few years, we have had excellent help from our interns with social media, and it's been a very positive relationship. And there's really more than just social media. It's being able to get in and navigate on the website as well. And there's programming, coding, and skills there. And it's really kind of the job has kind of grown, and the skill set has grown. And a few years ago, we had a young lady from Georgetown College, Sandra Jean Bernango. And she was just an excellent intern. And she's gone on. Now she works in Indiana for, I believe, Herff Jones or Jostens, one of the two that do the rings and all the graduation apparel. But she does her work for social media for that company, and she does it all remotely. I called her and asked her if she would consider working for us remotely and doing the job she did as an intern. And really the skill set with the website, you know, the need for transparency to timely update agendas, minutes, update information on the website, I think it's very important. Then the other side, on the social media side, of being able to put out information in a timely manner, and then, you know, having some skill to make it, you know, presentable and flashy, and, you know, kind of just some marketing to it, because that's where we're at today. Sandra Jean made a proposal back to myself, and I'd like to ask Stacy right now to comment on just the benefit of having somebody like Sandra Jean available to do this type of work.
I've missed her a lot. And I think actually Georgetown College has missed her a lot too. She did the same thing for them, and they're looking into hiring her also. But yeah, we have an intern that's not quite available.
Just not as available, and it doesn't have the website experience that Sandra Jean has. So Stacy and I reviewed Sandra Jean's proposal, and what Sandra Jean's proposing is she would do I've lost my place here. The important social media updating. She would do the general website maintenance, adding, deleting content, creating new pages, updating old information, and then do 2 or 3, I bet we could squeeze 4, one a week, maybe of employee highlights out. We would just send her the data and a picture, and she would create the post and post it. But she's proposing a fee of $800 a month to do this, and I think it's a bargain. And
She's amazing.
I would like the court to consider approving this, and I'd like to ask any comments from anyone or questions.
Is she also gonna help in navigating that thing?
Yes.
Old people like.
Yeah, I believe she could. She's
It's
good.
very user-friendly.
Well, I'll agree. So if you need a motion, Judge, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion from Rick.
Second.
Second from Tim Thompson. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
One other comment, I've actually, talked to people and they were wanting information. I've directed them to that and they've been well pleased with getting information, so.
Since Sandra left, it's not been up to date, to be honest, but I sent her a bunch of stuff today, and it will be probably tomorrow.
Yeah.
She's good.
Yeah.
So, with that said, I don't have any other new business. Does any court member have any new business or questions or comments?
Stace, you got Dwayne in being present before that last vote.
No,
Would you put that?
I don't know if this counts.
Thank you.
right before Sandra Jean.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rand.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Any court member, any other court member?
I have a comment, sir.
Tim Thompson.
There's a dear friend of ours that, she works at one of these local hotels. She's one of the managers there, and we had our annual fire symposium last week there, and she came up to me and she was wanting, so this goes to Chief Ward and Director Runyon. She came up to me and was wanting to just thank me to find the Sadyville guys that were in the symposium. So I went over there and introduced them to some of the county guys, and she had her son had a medical emergency the first of the year, and he did not make it. And as we deal with a lot, that just sometimes that is what happens. But what happens after the call and after that incident, I think really sticks with people. She was very grateful for your services, for the fire department services. She even mentioned how she mentioned McKinsey specifically, but there were others. That how they kind of stuck around and helped clean up afterwards and clean the house up with her, and just she's very appreciative. She's a sweet lady, and just knowing her personally, it meant a lot to me that you guys did that. So thank you.
And I'm sure John will as well. And then it's always good to hear the positive and share the positive. We've got a lot of staff that do a great job, and we're blessed to have the people we do, and they're our most important resource. And I think the work of the court reflects our appreciation and support of our staff and what we've done in the past. So, any other questions or comments? Any new business? Anyone in the audience would like to address the court or any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Out of here.
One. Is there a second? Second, Kelly Corman. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Kelly's always quick on that.
You had some comment, Joe Patton. I can't remember where it
Down
was.
here,
Okay.
I said, if you